Testing, testing. Woohoo. Okay.
Should I restart the meeting or should I, yeah, probably. So we make sure it's all recorded and everything.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I will
We'll
move
be
it a
quick.
rapid clip.
Yeah.
All right, members of the public, welcome to the Complete Street Commission's January 8th regular commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in accordance with public health guidelines. I'd like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and city staff present. I'm Chair Sally Cole. Commissioners present include Brian Altman, Meredith Bergen Bailey, Athena Arakomos, Lisbeth King, Jackie Sebrian, and Matthew Raskoff. City staff present include Katrine Maki, Senior Transportation Planner. Katrine, would you please provide instructions to the commission and the members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
For members of the public who wish to provide comment for any item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for a comment on that item, virtual attendees on the Zoom may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Under this reports and announcements section, city staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of this commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Katrine, do you have any reports and announcements?
Yes, the March meeting will be at Bellhaven Community Center.
Great.
AB 413 daylighting law is now in effect in all of California. More information was posted on Menlo Park social media, included in the digest and posted on the city's website. I will bring the commission more detailed information about what Menlo Park is doing to enhance knowledge and visibility of AB 413 and what the police department may do with enforcement at a future meeting. That concludes my reports and announcements.
Thank you. Under general public comment, members of the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject that is not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items that are not listed on the agenda, and therefore, the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Katrine, can you please call for general public comment?
For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium and make your comment.
I'll just give this a beat maybe since
No one even raised their hand to tell us they couldn't hear.
That's true. Okay, well, that's all right. So don't think we have any general public
raised hands.
comment. All right, so move on to regular business. The commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The first regular business item tonight is E1, accept the Complete Streets Commission minutes for December 11th, 2024. Are there any clarifying questions from the commission before I take public comment? I had one, which was, I was concerned with the phrasing in the minutes, that it would sound like the alternative 2B, which would allow for a right on red unless a pedestrian or a biker or whomever hit the button that activated the protected crossing. It sounded by the wording a little bit to me like it was included or connected almost as a bundle with the geometric improvements. And I don't think that's how we meant it. I think we meant it as a alternative to be considered as an alternative to alternative 3, two sort of parallel alternatives. So if folks agree that that was the interpretation, I'm happy to, kind of write it that way and then submit it in an email, or you could submit to you and you can circulate an email, people with the original and a revised, and see if people feel comfortable with the language. But I just checked in with Liz, but if anyone else has any other alternative thoughts, I thought that our general intent was to say alternative 3, no red on red, alternative to be right on red unless there's a protected crossing. And then separate and apart from those two things, we agreed to move forward with the evaluation of geometric improvements.
That's how I remember it. So we
Okay,
can modify.
So I'll just make
yeah.
it super plain and then we'll circulate it in email. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Sorry, do we have any public comments on this item?
For virtual
This
attendees.
is- Yeah. Sorry, this is the on the approval of the minutes for our last meeting. Thank you. So in calling for public comment, I don't think we have any public comment on the accepting the minutes. So do we have a motion and a second to accept the minutes with the revision to come that we will resolve over email? Or do we want to accept the minutes at the next meeting after we resolve? What?
I think we should just make the motion to, I'll make the motion to accept
Okay.
these minutes with clarifying that there's two alternatives. Alternative 3, no right turn on red, and an alternative 2B, right turn on red with protected signal. 2 options, one or the other. It doesn't read that way. So.
Okay,
try that.
so does anyone want to concur or second that motion? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bailey. And do you want to take a vote?
Yes, let me quick write down.
Okay.
Um,
I'm allowed to vote even though I wasn't there, right? Is that a thing?
I think you have to
understand?
abstain, actually.
Hmm,
I don't
I feel like
remember.
Kevin told us that, like, I
Oh,
can't,
really?
I
I
don't
don't-
make motions, but I'm not sure.
Okay, let's
So
ask.
I don't need to.
Do
but-
we happen to know if Commissioner Seaborn or anyone who didn't attend that particular meeting has to abstain? I mean, I guess if you watched the video. He did.
Yeah, no, we have.
Oh,
That is, like,
Traditionally.
But I'm
It's
I'm pretty
technically.
sure that the last 2 times it's come up, we've been told that it's not necessary.
Oh, okay,
So I'm
good.
just asking.
Sure,
like,
sure.
I don't need to.
I'll have to look that up and get back to you if you want to. I
Alright.
brought
Yeah,
the Robert's
so
Rules
if-
book.
so why-
but-
why don't-
Abstained today, and I
So maybe
probably
you make a different suggestion because that's a really good point. And, you know, Commissioner Seaborn might be able to vote on this item. We just don't know. So why don't we, if everyone's all right with this, can we just push off the approval of these minutes to the next meeting? We will have all reviewed some alternative, like clarifying language, and then we will get clarity on that and you can vote at that meeting.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we're moving on to E2. Provide feedback on Atherton, hello, City of Atherton, El Camino Real Conceptual Designs. Welcome again. You guys are hard at work. Super speedy, City of Atherton. Thank you for coming back. Katrine Maki, a senior transportation planner, is going to introduce this item.
And I'd like to introduce Carolyn. I didn't check with you on how to pronounce your last name, so I'm just going to try it and we'll see how it goes. Mama Aldel? Oh, that's hard.
Mama Radio?
Yeah.
Pretty close. Hi, good evening, Chair and Commission members. My name is Carolyn Mamaradlo, and I'm a Senior Project Manager with the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. Here with me tonight, I have Doug Kim, who's our staff lead with the town of Atherton. And we also have Andrew Lee joining us via Zoom, who's our design lead from the consultant team. So I can share my screen.
Yeah.
We have a
Thank you for coming.
brief presentation for you tonight. There we go. Yeah, glad to be here and happy new year.
Happy New Year.
So it's been a few months since our last update to this commission, which was back in August 2024. And we've included a bit of a refresher on the project background and process, and we'll provide a recap of some of the work that's completed to date. But most importantly, we're here to present a set of proposed design concepts for El Camino Real and looking for your feedback. To help frame tonight's discussion, I'd emphasize that the designs we're sharing today are really high-level concepts that have a long path ahead of them of more refinements and detailed design work. At this stage, what we're really looking for is feedback on some of the bigger picture trade-offs of each concept and any major concerns or opportunities that we should consider as the project advances into the future phase. So with that, I'll move on to the next slide here. The El Camino Real Complete Street Study is being led by both the town of Atherton and the TA, but it's really a partnership across a number of different stakeholders that are served by the regional corridor. This includes City of Menlo Park, who has jurisdiction over the southern limits of our study area towards Valparaiso Avenue. Samtrans, who operates a core bus service along the entirety of El Camino Real. The unincorporated community of North Fair Oaks, as well as Redwood City, have jurisdiction over the northern limits of the study area towards Selby Lane. And finally, Caltrans, who owns and operates El Camino Real as a state highway. So the process for this study includes 3 major milestones or phases. We're currently in the second phase, which is focused on evaluating potential design concepts. The proposed design concepts that we'll share with you today were informed by an existing conditions analysis that was completed in the first phase. And Doug's going to be sharing a little bit more on that, those findings in later slides. And then ultimately in phase 3, we'll be working towards a preferred concept and final plan that's targeted for spring of this year. All right, so focusing on the work to be done in this current phase, we've taken all that we've learned from the existing conditions analysis and developed some preliminary design options. These options are being evaluated based on criteria tied to our complete streets goals and objectives and framed based on the different trade-offs required to implement each option. During this phase, we'll go through another round of robust engagement with our partners, key stakeholders, and the community to get their feedback on these concepts. And this will include a number of in-person and virtual events, an online survey, and community meetings that we're really hoping you can help promote attendance for. And then this will be used to inform the next phase of identifying a preferred concept that will ultimately need to be coordinated with Caltrans for more detailed design and engineering work. So with that, I'll hand it off to Doug.
Thanks, Carol. All right. You know, like any local transportation initiative that is undertaken, this project didn't come out of thin air. It was in fact rooted in a number of local policies and plans in the town of Atherton. But because we really do see this as a multi-jurisdictional corridor with frontage in Menlo Park, we also look to other sources, including sources within Menlo Park. The primary policy foundation for this project came from our 2014 citywide bike and pedestrian master plan. That plan looked at El Camino Real as being the backbone of an active transportation network throughout the town. And it called on conversion of the outer southbound lane on El Camino to a Class 1 facility. But it also looked at a number of other facilities on side streets, including Class 2 lanes on Selby Lane. That master plan called on us to, it included a traffic study to look at the feasibility in this study of converting one or both travel lanes in each direction for these dedicated pedestrian and bike facilities. And we'll be going over a little bit of that today. The intent was to identify locations for any additional traffic signals, pedestrian hybrid signals, and crossing improvements, infrastructure that could help up our game when it comes to bike and pedestrian facilities and safety. But as we said before, there is a fair amount of frontage within this corridor, which goes from Selby Lane at the north down to Valparaiso at the south. And so, of course, we have been referring to the city's El Camino Real corridor study back from 2015, where the scope of what you looked at is essentially the scope of what we're looking as well. So we are looking at the stretch from Valparaiso going north to Encinal, which I know was a part of the corridor study back then. We know you looked at several alternatives on how to handle bike and ped facilities in that stretch. And so the planning that we're doing here is in consultation with the city, with the understanding that Menlo Park still is yet to define what kinds of facilities it wants to program in that area. We also looked at other local sources like the CCAG, Comprehensive Bike and Pedestrian Plan, the Countywide Transportation Plan, a Samtrans Reimagine initiative that looked at transit service and other transportation options on El Camino. And we also referred to the Grand Boulevard Initiative. Both the historical work that the GBI did, but we're also keenly aware, as you are, that GBI has resumed activities and will be doing some pretty heavy-duty design work and planning for both Menlo Park, Atherton, and the entire Grand Boulevard in the coming year and beyond. So we believe that the work that we're going to be talking about tonight will hopefully segue into the countywide GBI initiative. We also looked at the MTC Active Transportation Plan at the regional level, and we're aware of work at Caltrans District 4, including a shop project in Redwood City to the north, as well as the District 4 bike plan, which identified these improvements on El Camino as being a top priority. So this map here sort of shows the context for this multi-jurisdictional corridor in El Camino. El Camino, of course, is the spine that runs sort of in the middle left to right there. What we try to do is capture what's existing, or in some cases planned, in the way of bikeway facilities. We note that in Menlo Park, there's been no firm commitment to the El Camino corridor going up to Encinal. So we recognize that as a potential buffered lane. And so as the city continues to figure out its vision for those facilities, we want to make sure that our facilities mesh to provide seamless integration for users along the corridor. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so like any good plan, we took stock in the year 2024 to catalog the existing conditions along the corridor. We did a lot of work we did a lot of work to identify who uses the corridor. And what we found is that, of course, as a multimodal corridor, you have a whole population of different demographics that are served. We have a number of schools, particularly in Atherton, along El Camino. And so there are a number of school-aged kids that use the corridor. We also had a pretty healthy amount of seniors that use that corridor as well, generally reflective of the demographics along the corridor. One thing that was interesting is that we saw a pretty high share of persons with disabilities that use this 1.5 mile corridor, sometimes starting and ending in Atherton, but often traveling through El Camino to and from Redwood City and Menlo Park. We recognize that this is a flyover zone for a lot of folks who are traveling through it. In terms of travel modes on El Camino, there was a pretty decent active transportation mode share, 8.5% for transit, walking, and biking along the corridor, which surprised us a little bit. Samtrans service, as you know, is good on El Camino, but we don't have a lot of ridership in Atherton. One thing that was interesting and helpful for this study was when we looked at the streetlight data, we found that over half of vehicle trips using this 1.5 mile corridor through Atherton and Menlo Park are less than 5 miles in length, which, as you all know, is the sort of prime type of trip for active transportation mode shifts. And we also noted that this was designated as high injury network. Part of the motivation for Atherton was the number of collisions, fatal and otherwise, that we saw largely in open stretches of El Camino and Atherton. Some of these made the news that you might have heard about, and so we want to be able to make safety a key criterion in the study. In terms of traffic numbers, pretty much what you expect from your neighbors to the north. We had 36,000 ADT throughout most of the corridor. We had higher delay at the signalized intersections in Atherton, primarily at the Atherton-Fair Oaks intersection. We know about Valparaiso as well. Selby Lane, which does not have any stop controls on the main line of El Camino, has some delay from Selby Lane. Tuscaloosa and Watkins are other unsignalized intersections where we had some amounts of delay, particularly at cross streets. In terms of what the community had to tell us, we looked at, of course, all the data sources that produced some of those findings we showed earlier, but we went to the public, both Atherton residents as well as many Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and Redwood City residents as well, to ask them what their top priorities are for this corridor so that we can go from good to great. And not surprisingly, safety for both pedestrians and cyclists were priorities number 1 and 2 by a long shot from the over 300 surveys that we received. Safety for drivers was also a concern. Many of us who drive down there see people trying to navigate the shoulders by bike or foot and want to see safety improved for those folks as well. Then you see a number of other priorities that are sort of on a different tier than the safety related items that we mentioned earlier. All right, so that's a real quick sort of snapshot about the existing conditions that set the stage for some of the design concepts that we have been looking at. And I'm going to now turn it over to Andrew Lee from Parametrics, who will walk you through some of our concepts and get some initial feedback from you.
Great, thank you, Doug, and good evening, commissioners. We'll just go to the next slide. So just to recap a little bit of what Doug mentioned, the initial concepts that the project team developed were based on the community output and also some of the parameters of the study. We considered many alternatives, not all of which are being presented tonight. Some of the initial alternatives were screened out, and they included elements like two-way bikeways on one side of the street or busways. But the 3 that we will be presenting tonight are the ones that scored most highly in our initial screening in relation to those concepts and the community input that we received. And so tonight's objective is to receive your feedback for the design alternatives and ultimately to advance a preferred design into a later stage for detailed engineering. Next slide, please. We tried to synthesize the competing needs of the corridor into these 6 broad categories, which were alluded to in the community feedback process. And so they relate to safety for users bicycling, walking, and driving, and also riding transit. And then outside of the immediate safety issues, some quality of life matters as they relate to traffic diversion, especially when looking at alternatives that may reduce the number of vehicle drive lanes. Some of the concepts also would require reallocating existing street parking along the corridor. This is primarily in the northbound direction. And then lastly, the opportunity to install stormwater detention and collection features as right now it's mostly unpaved shoulder and not equipped for stormwater runoff. Next slide, please. So in the section specifically adjacent to Menlo Park, and that's largely from the Glenwood, Valparaiso to approximately Alejandro, we're dealing with a approximate 100-foot right-of-way. It does get a little bit wider to the north as we get into the North Fair Oaks area, which widens out to about 130 feet. But specific to the Menlo Park area, this is where El Camino Real has 3 southbound lanes and then 2 northbound lanes with on-street parking. And there are also existing sidewalks in the northbound direction. In the southbound direction, adjacent to the town of Atherton, there are no sidewalks. It's an unpaved area with a shoulder. Next slide, please. So there are some common elements that all of the alternatives are intending to provide. They relate to things like crossing treatments. So not along the corridor, but across the corridor. Enhanced crossing treatments, especially where the existing crossing is not controlled with a traffic signal or a beacon. The intent is that for highly trafficked intersections, those traffic signal controls or beacon controls would be introduced to make the crossing safer. Also, the corridor largely does not have lighting, particularly in the southbound direction. And because there are no paved sidewalks on the southbound side of the corridor within the Menlo Park adjacent area, the provision of sidewalks would also allow for the opportunity to provide paved areas for bus stop access.
Can I
Next
ask a question?
Sure.
Andrew, thank you. When you talked to bullet point 1 there, enhanced pedestrian bicycle crossings at key intersections, in the slide where you showed what the public called out as kind of their lead concerns about that area of the corridor, they weren't necessarily saying, oh, we want more enhanced intersections. So is that being proposed or included because you assume that the traffic, the bike and ped traffic will go up with the installation of sidewalks or bike lanes, et cetera?
It's certainly the intent that people walking and biking would be attracted to better amenities. And then also because we have bus stops and ostensibly people would be trying to cross the street to access bus stops and businesses, that there's a certain minimum spacing that we want to provide. And also in consideration of how wide El Camino Real is, the number of lanes that people would have to cross, it's also within the engineering best practices to provide some manner of control.
Oh, that's a good point. And so with the enhancements at the crossings, are you envisioning that to be like traffic lights or more like pedestrian and bike activated, blinkers and things like that? Well, it is a very wide road, so I was thinking it might be traffic lights. I'm just curious if that's been discussed, the alternatives.
We are considering a toolkit that includes traffic signals that would be actuated. That's traffic engineering speak for button pressing or passive detection, like with sensors, to detect people walking or bicycling. If it's a full traffic signal, that would also include detection for people driving. If it is a beacon that's intended primarily for walking and bicycling, then we would not have that vehicle sensing technology. So, and then there's also geometric features, like if we were to go to wider sidewalks, there's opportunities to push the curb out and create bulb outs, create refuge areas in the median, and also provide enhanced signage and lighting.
Thank you.
If I could just add one more thing. What we heard residents in Atherton saying is, hey, we know that Atherton has 3 unsignalized hawk beacons north of Encinal, but that there are no refuges in the middle, and that it's intimidating to try to cross 6 lanes of open road. And so to Andrew's point, we are looking at all the ways we can provide more comfort for folks who want to cross Yeah, and we are considering signalized intersections.
No, I'm so interested to hear that the folks in Atherton are thinking that the non-signalized, the blinking might not be enough. In part because we discussed this in relation to Santa Cruz Avenue. We did a study of Santa Cruz Avenue safety, and we were looking at the intersection of Olive and Santa Cruz right, where the crossing guard is at Hillview Middle.
Hmm.
And we were talking about, is that a signalized intersection or is it the blinking? And Atherton is the blinking. So it's interesting that you've been getting that feedback.
Yeah, and our beacons are sort of earlier generation beacons are not as bright and loud as
Yeah.
current ones. So.
Okay. Thank you for adding that. Very interesting. Thank you.
We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the three concepts that we're presenting tonight are essentially a spectrum, one from probably the least amount of change into a greater degree of change, and then a hybrid of the two. So for what we're calling design concept one, the main feature that I think you'd notice is that it would maintain 3 lanes in each direction of El Camino Real where there exists 3 lanes. And so that's the caveat, that in the Menlo Park adjacent area where there exist only 2 northbound lanes and parking, that that condition would remain. But the intent here is that the sidewalks and the bike lane would fit within the existing unpaved area and painted shoulder. And so the bike lanes would be the simple stripe with no horizontal or vertical buffers. In some areas, the sidewalks, particularly in the southbound direction, would be rather narrow and possibly constrained by existing raised features like utility poles and large trees. And so the enhancement to both bicycle and pedestrian comfort and safety would be more on the modest to marginal side of the spectrum.
Andrew, what about people with disabilities? Is there any concern with the narrow sidewalks? Are they accommodated by the width of the sidewalk?
Yeah, what we are looking at with the concept is that we could aim for minimum facilities, 4 feet wide, not counting the curb. But there are existing utility poles and trees that exist, and there's very little opportunity to sort of navigate around such features. It may require that there be a bit of tree removal and utility pole relocation in order to provide that minimum facility. So it's a very constrained condition when trying to keep all of the vehicle lanes in place on El Camino Real.
And in this concept, was the street parking removed on the northbound side? 'Cause-
Yeah.
Right.
So in the Menlo Park area
Oh, yeah.
where there are 2 lanes, we are finding that the parking can be maintained, and that the bike lane would be situated between the northbound El Camino Real lane and curbside parking.
Oh. Oh, between the parking and the.
And the moving traffic lane. It would be what you'd consider a traditional bike lane next to
See,
on-street parking.
okay. Yes.
Are we doing clarifying questions now?
Oh, sorry. Asking too many clarifying questions.
Was there another question I could answer?
I think you're good to go.
Okay, let's go to the next one then. All right, concept 2. This is the concept with wider sidewalks and a horizontally and or vertically protected or buffered bike lane. The most noticeable feature here is that in order to find the room to provide wider sidewalks and buffered bike facilities, the need is to remove one of the vehicle travel lanes on El Camino Real, or if it's currently parking, as is the case in the Menlo Park area, that on-street parking would have to be converted to a bicycle facility, presuming that the existing sidewalks are not reconstructed where they currently exist. So that's a pretty big change to the corridor. The bikeway that we're considering could either be at roadway grade or it could be raised to a sidewalk grade. They do have different costs related to that. There's utilities to consider, and also how that affects the stormwater drainage and other storm drain features that we're able to provide. But largely, when we have more room with the subtraction of the vehicle lane, we're able to have more opportunities to get around conflicting utilities, conflicting trees, and provide more street furnishing zones, have more areas for lighting and so forth. I'll move to the third concept then. So the third concept is a hybrid of concept 1 and concept 2, where the proposal is to selectively provide 3 lanes in one direction of El Camino Real and 2 lanes in the opposing direction. And in the concept that we're looking at right now, because in the Menlo Park adjacent area near Glenwood and Valparaiso, El Camino Real currently exists with 2 northbound lanes, that condition would be maintained. And we're also aware in talking with the town that Valparaiso has a very heavy southbound right turn demand. And with the existing 3rd lane and all of the vehicle traffic going to the schools at Valparaiso, we have a concept that shows a 3rd southbound El Camino Real lane. This concept as a hybrid of the 2 means that when we're subtracting one of the vehicle lanes rather than 2 of the vehicle lanes, we do have an opportunity for a horizontal buffer for the bikeway and sidewalks that would be wider than what would be afforded under concept 1, but neither of those would be quite as wide as what would be possible under concept 2. So it is very much a hybrid of the 2. You would get not as many vehicle lanes and sidewalks and bikeways that are a little bit narrower than with the full lane subtraction within concept 2. One more thing is that because of the lane shift, there may incur some more construction costs to modify the existing median. There will be some offsets or misalignments in the way the vehicle lanes approach intersections. And so there could be also some more work to make that concept work out. Whereas under concept 2, because the subtraction is more on the symmetrical side of things, the impacts to the median could be less. I'll just touch on one more thing, which is in the North Fair Oaks area. The concept here is that El Camino Real would be 2 lanes in the southbound direction, moving away from the highway, and would be 3 lanes going in the northbound direction, heading towards, I think it's Woodside Road. Next slide, please. I think I'll turn it back over to Carolyn.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So just to kind of wrap up the presentation deck, I'll summarize the next steps for the team. So we'll be proceeding with another round of community engagement this month through February. And use the feedback that we get to further refine the concepts that we shared with you today. Concurrently, we'll be working alongside the team that's leading the Grand Boulevard Initiative to streamline both efforts so that we're not duplicating any work. And then come March, we hope to have a locally preferred alternative identified that we can then engage with Caltrans on for the more detailed design work and engineering work. So with that, can turn it back over for questions or comments.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before we move for public comment, may I take any clarifying questions from the commission? Yes. Do you have any?
I had a quick question. Do we have data on the hourly traffic demand? I saw the 36,000 daily traffic demand on the corridor, but the hourly demand is what is sort of where you see the bottlenecks in the corridor and what impact reducing some of the lanes might have at the hourly level during rush hour, for example?
We do have hourly volume data throughout the day for intersections, including Encinal and Glenwood, Valparaiso. Don't have those numbers here, but we can make those available.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Yes, go ahead.
I wasn't clear on exactly where the starting or ending points are. I know this is a long corridor, but what are we reviewing here? Just the part that's adjacent between Atherton and Menlo Park? I mean, I'd like to know the stretch we're looking at.
Sure. The project scope is from Selby Lane at the north end
Okay,
to our city limits down at Valparaiso Glenwood.
okay.
We recognize within that 1.5 mile corridor that the stretch between Encinal and Glenwood is Menlo Park frontage.
So what happens in that 1.5 mile corridor won't necessarily happen to the north or south of it. We're only talking about that.
We wanted to provide you sort of an overall perspective on what's happening north of Encinal, but yeah, certainly we think our focus with you is on the Menlo Park frontage.
Okay. And then my second question was, in option number 2, the design option, you have a center refuge, but you in the image, but you do not mention it in the bullet points. And having lived on Alejandra, I know about the fatalities crossing El Camino. And I would like to know if that's part of the design or is that just in the image?
Absolutely. Pedestrian refuges are intended to be the design of any new crossings on El Camino, as well as upgrades to existing crossings.
Would they only exist at the crossing points or would they exist the whole corridor, the refuge?
They would be at the marked crossings that
Okay.
are either existing or planned.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yes.
Actually, I might have 2. So does that work?
Yep, it does. How many parking spaces are there on El Camino? Like, is it a lot? Is it 5?
So we
I'm
did
just-
a sort of desktop assessment of parking. The rough estimate is about 30 or so spots. And that's mainly in the northern end and the southern end.
Okay.
I think the last time you presented, you said it was along the businesses there, correct?
Correct, only in the northbound direction.
Mhm.
And just for like, so I fully understand when you were talking about delays at the side streets, that's delays from traffic getting onto El Camino, right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, oftentimes
Thanks.
people trying to make a left onto El Camino.
Got it. Thanks.
And just back to the question about specific number in the southern segment, it's about 17 spots.
Go ahead, Commissioner Altman.
Two questions. Back to the statistics on that section. What are the top three causes for fatalities or severe injuries in that corridor, in that stretch? What's the top three causes?
Well, the collisions that we've seen in Atherton have been mid-block, number one, so they've not largely been at the intersections. And they have been vehicle on pedestrian. Sometimes you have pedestrian on pedestrian or bike on pedestrian. These are vehicles hitting pedestrians mid-block. And so
That's the top three OTS data for that?
yes,
It's not speed or
no,
cars.
it is speed and frankly, people crossing in between controlled intersections.
Yeah, that happened. I was just driving in an El Camino in Atherton today, and that happened. Someone right near the Fifth Avenue Shell station, someone just sort of darted out in front of the car and not at an intersection, but just from the side of the road, trying to beat the traffic. Yeah.
So what were the causes? The causes were, what was the actual cause? Car speeding, making a left, not paying attention to the pedestrian, person in the crosswalk.
Yeah, these were people crossing El Camino at at unmarked crossings, in between crossings. And as you know, in that stretch of El Camino, there aren't a lot of crossings and signalized streets. So people just aren't willing to walk to the nearest intersection to do that. So when they cross, oftentimes when it's dark, you have cars that are moving pretty fast. These are not cars that are turning by and large. They're cars on the straightaway of El Camino that are not seeing pedestrians and are hitting them.
Can I just ask one, like, I think I understand, but when you say they're not at marked crosswalks, but they might be at an intersection, right? They might be, is it that they're flat out in the middle of a stretch where there's no traffic coming in, or are they leaving a side street and crossing where there's not a crosswalk? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I don't know specifically if they're crossing from a side street where there is no crosswalk. It's both that. I think that they tend to cross more mid-block. They try to figure out where to go when they're coming from a side street, and they just go, I don't know where the crossing is. I'm going to make a run for it.
Just a supplemental question for that. I guess I'm not super familiar with the bus stops in Atherton, but is it possible that the bus stops are like mid-block as well, or are they always at the intersections? Because
the key bus stop in Atherton is at a signalized intersection at Fifth Avenue. The other bus stops are definitely not at signalized intersections. They tend to be mid-block. As most of our side streets have stop controls.
with the hawk signals,
I'm sorry?
with like the hawk signals, like the button that you push, or is it like, are these where people are darting across mid-block? Is that near bus stops?
The ones I recall are not necessarily near bus stops. I don't think
Oh.
these are people running to a bus stop on the other side.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more clarifying questions from the commission?
Can you explain the difference between buffered and protected? I'm looking at design concept 2, where it says buffered / protected bike lanes. And some of them are just paint, whereas some are cement planters. Which is which?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So with this concept, we're really alluding to a variety of different types of buffers and protections that are being considered. And it's really a range of, I think what Andrew called either horizontal or vertical separation from the travel lane. So We haven't, landed on a specific type of buffer protection, but it may include just a striped horizontal buffer or vertical elements like a curb or be even like elevated to be at grade with the sidewalk.
All right,
Typically, when we refer to buffer, that's the horizontal separation, and more commonly, that's a painted horizontal separation without a vertical feature. When we talk about protected, that's where the vertical element gets introduced, and so that could be the planter or the curb, or sometimes it's plastic posts. They're also referred to as separated bikeways. So protected and separated are sort of interchangeable for
thank
bikeways.
you. That's very helpful. Commissioner Ramos?
Just sorry, going back to the pedestrians crossing the street. A question, I think Commissioner King was somewhat alluding to this. There's in this picture, there's like a median. I guess how wide would that median be in a lot of these designs? Do you have a sense for, I guess I don't know how wide it is now. I'm guessing in design to minimize construction costs, you would not be changing that much, but
I can let, before you chime in there, those are prototypical sections. We did try to focus on what we thought was the profile of El Camino near Valparaiso. As Andrew mentioned, with design concept 3 in particular, that we did see the potential shifting of the center median, which of course incur additional costs in order to facilitate the 3-2 design that we talked about before. I think with design concept 2, there was far less disruption to the center median. In short, we tried not to mess with the geometry of El Camino. In particular, at Valparaiso Glenwood, we knew from the beginning of our study that that was a real hotspot, and we didn't want to do anything to mess with the geometry of El Camino as it crosses from Atherton into Menlo Park. But with alternative 3, there are some potential areas where there has to be some shifting of that median.
and what's the average planned width for that median? Like, is it just a sort of concrete barrier between them, between the two directions, or is there some kind of tree in the middle, for example?
Andrew, did you want to speak to that issue?
Yeah, so the cross section you're looking at right now is a mid-block area that does not have a left turn lane. And so whether or not there's a left turn lane is the critical factor for how wide the median is. If we're talking about a mid-block area, or if we're establishing a crossing without a left turn lane, that median could be about 14 feet wide. But when we're looking at an intersection that has either an existing left turn lane or one that needs to be provided, the vehicle lane is about 11 feet wide. And so the median for a crosswalk going through a signalized intersection, for instance, that refuge of sorts would be in the 3 to 4 foot range, not super duper wide. But you are afforded the benefit of signal control or beacon control. So the necessity to like stage your crossing within a refuge area is a little bit less, because the signal should be timed to allow for somebody to cross in one phase.
Thank you.
If there are no further clarifying questions from the commission,
Could I ask just one more? Sorry.
Commissioner Roscoe?
I was looking back at the Atherton master plan, the 2014 document cited at the beginning, and that actually did propose a 2-way shared trail for this section of Atherton. And I think I heard you say that you rejected that early on in the process. It's obviously not presented as one of the options here. And I just wanted to understand, why was that earlier, the 2014 Alta report, rejected in this study?
Yeah, it's important to remember that report recognized, yes, the potential of a 2-way cycle track. But it also said, look, do your due diligence, take a look at the mobility and traffic impacts of different design options. So as Andrew said earlier, when we looked at the universe of potential design solutions, We looked at the potential of a cycle track just on one side, a cycle track paired with a one-way on the other side, and determined that for a number of reasons, including right-of-way constraints, that and circulation patterns, that having a two-way cycle track on one side, whether it's paired with something else on the other side, wasn't something that we thought would screen to the next level of analysis, largely because of circulation issues. I don't know, Andrew.
I can give a little bit more detail. So yeah, we took a pretty deep look at the two-way separated bikeway. A few factors. One is because of there being two-way bicycle traffic on one side of the street. And that's sort of an atypical section. For one thing, it's not compatible with the plans for the bikeways to the north and to the south. Those plans are for one-way separated bikeways on each side of the street. Two is looking at potential vehicular delay, particularly at traffic signals. The best practice for a two-way separated bikeway on one side of the street is that there be a dedicated signal phase so that there not be any right turns allowed during the bicycle crossing phase. So that's an issue there. Also with vehicle movements, there are a lot of U-turns on this corridor, and given the right-of-way constraints for a lot of the U-turning movements, they end up tracking pretty wide and needing to go into what would traditionally be the bike lane in order to complete their movement. But if you have a two-way facility on one side of the street, you really can't allow for a vehicle making a U-turn to track into any part of that two-way bikeway. And so that necessitated a much larger lateral shift in the vehicle lanes that had all kinds of effects on how the median would need to be redesigned. And so it was the unfamiliarity of a two-way facility on one side of the street, the incompatibility with the plans to the north and to the south, and then just the degree of change needed to accommodate that facility type to be safe and comfortable was like a really big lift. And that's why it did not score as well as the three alternatives presented tonight.
Thank you for your answers. All right, with no more clarifying questions, we will ask Katrine to call for public comments on this item.
We have one hand raised and someone here from the public, so I'll call Brian first up.
Hello.
Good evening, Brian Schmidt from Menlos Park. And Menlos Park, is this on? I need to do something.
If you lean forward and speak right into it, you can tell. Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think maybe just if you kind of lift it up toward you a bit higher. Yeah, that might. Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Again, Brian Schmidt from Menlos Park. Menlos Park works on climate change issues with a particular focus on Menlo Park, but it's not an exclusive focus. So I just want to start by thanking the city of Atherton for this excellent that they're doing. That moving forward on this is a great thing for adding non-vehicular mobility, getting people out of cars. And I think it is an excellent example for Menlo Park to think about as well. Regarding the different concepts and the request for feedback, I note that concepts number 2 and 3 most closely fit the ideas of maximizing bicycle usage by getting that level of separation and protection. And the city of Atherton staff just mentioned how proposals to the north and the south also have some level of separation for bicycles. So I believe concepts number 2 and 3 would most closely fit and represent continuity with bike lanes to the north and south. And at some point, we're hoping that Menlo Park will also do this. So if concepts number 2 and 3 would allow Menlo Park to do something similar, and then have continuity all the way from Mountain View to Spartanburg. So for those reasons, I think those 2 and 3 are the best. But number one is definitely better than what we got right now. And it's better frankly than what Menlo Park is. So I recognize that Menlo Park is working on other streets and working on bikeability in other areas. There might be funding of opportunities available for Menlo Park to make this an addition, not instead of the other priorities that Menlo Park is thinking. So I'd like to encourage that. My organization has worked on together with the city on funding opportunities. We'd be happy to continue. Lastly, I'd like to bring up that especially this issue came up in 2015 with a city council doing a study on the El Camino on bike lanes, and they were very interested in getting bike lanes on El Camino. One of their concerns was that the other cities weren't doing it, and obviously it's happening. So that's another reason why the city should move forward, and the park could consider that as well. And they can get the city there.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving to online. Kevin, I will push the button saying allow to talk.
Hi, hi committee members, staff, and other members of the public. Much appreciate the attention on this and the work that's been put into it. I'm Kevin Rennie from Menlo Park of the Willows neighborhood. Again, really appreciate the work on this. Previously, I worked in San Carlos 20 years ago, tried to ride my bike to work. Yeah, didn't get past Menlo Park. Middlefield, El Camino, totally impossible. So great to see incremental steps. Forced to drive my car and make it worse, but hopefully this is a little gain. Another call out more recently, Glenwood and Middlefield, which is pretty proximal to this area. There was a fatality of a cyclist last February, so more safe roads would be great. Concept 1 through 3, I think concept 2 is hopefully the obvious choice. More needs to be done. The infrastructure for since World War II, which is close to 100 years, is just cars, and it needs to change. I believe class 1 or 4 bike lanes with physical separations are the only answer. We need to bring back safety and comfort to bicyclists. Also scooters and any other forms of transportation other than cars, I think is necessary. Additionally, I encourage Menlo Park to pilot something that mirrors this, what Atherton's doing, class 4 bike lanes on the south portion, south of this project. I would strongly encourage or wish for you to consider removing all parking on El Camino for visibility. Cyclists and pedestrians and scooters and things like that cannot be seen when there's a car parked there. It significantly impairs the car and the driver's ability to see people. I think this can be the state has taken actions with the daylighting standards on crosswalks and things, but it hasn't gone far enough. And I encourage you to take additional steps to pilot and see where that takes us. Thank you. I yield back.
May I ask a clarifying question? Kevin, I didn't hear which of the concepts that you endorsed. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Design 2? Okay,
Design 2. Yep. Thanks so much.
thank you.
Okay, and now we have Ken.
Good evening. My name is Ken Kirschner. I live in the Allied Arts neighborhood in Menlo Park, and I've been a bike advocate for about 6 years in the Palo Alto Menlo Park area, and was involved in some of the kind of urgent planning and advocacy work for the Palo Alto and Mountain View sections of El Camino. So I'm super excited to see the progress in the planning for Atherton, and in the hopes that the adjacent parts of Menlo Park will follow in the excellent work that's been presented tonight. I also would like to advocate for concept 2, specifically the elevated bike lanes. And I think physical separation is critical. Also, the concept of daylighting El Camino is super important around driveways and intersections and bus stops. And so that was an important part of the discussion along El Camino. I also wanted to ask the committee to, or commission to pay close attention to SB 960, the new Complete Streets legislation that was signed into law, and engage with Caltrans early, and specifically engaging them on protected intersections and the design information bulletin that is pertinent to El Camino. Thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes our raised hands and public comment.
Thank you. All right, then, well, it's time for the commissioners to provide feedback. Thank you. If you would like to at all summarize what you said in the beginning of your presentation around the kind of feedback you were seeking from us. I think it was you, Carolyn, who said particularly interested in the trade-offs on of the three concepts.
Yeah, I can recap what we're looking for today. I'm happy to pull up the cross sections again if that helps with the discussion. But as Andrew noted in his talking points, the various concepts require different trade-offs in terms of parking, maintaining parking, maintaining travel lanes, maintaining travel speeds, while also trying to obtain goals for bicycling and walking safety. So we framed those trade-offs for discussion by the commission today, and just want to hear which concept and what relevant trade-offs do you see moving forward or have any concerns with?
And maybe that slide with the 6 blocks. Do you want to show that one? I'm just trying to make sure we give you what you're looking for, and that was a focusing graphic. There we go, 10.
Can I ask one small, I know it's just a clarifying question, but before we get to everything else, the parking spaces that, are there any of them that the daylighting law would be like, is that factoring in that, the new daylighting thing? Or would any of those spaces disappear because of that?
I think the short answer is no, but
Okay.
I'll let Andrew chime in to explain that better.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, there's the parking near intersections is pretty limited in along the corridor. In the south area, within the Menlo Park portion, like approaching Encinal, there's a northbound right turn lane, so like that takes out all sort of potential parking. And then to the south of Encinal and to the north of Glenwood, there's mostly commercial driveways where there's parking, but they're not considered intersections, so they're not subject to that daylighting law. In the North Fair Oaks area, where there's existing parking, similarly, there's a lot of right turn pockets designed to facilitate the movements onto the side streets. And so that precludes what could have been parking. So it's the parking removal doesn't really get affected by the AB 413 law for daylighting.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, would you like to provide your feedback to the county and the town of Atherton on the 3 design concepts?
I'm happy to get us started.
Sure.
I wanted to speak in favor of option 2 by far. It's not often that the better option's the cheaper one. And in this case, option 3 costs more and is vastly inferior in my view. And option 1 is not even worth considering, I think, just given the vehicular speeds on El Camino and the way that paint does not provide any confidence or safety for a cyclist. So option 2 to me deals with the fact, the U-turn concerns, of the speeding concerns on El Camino. I think it's already supported by all of the reports that were cited at the beginning of the study, including Caltrans District 4's report, the Menlo Park El Camino Real study, the Grand Boulevard study. The master plan effectively supports this, even if we don't do it the two-way cycle track. It advocated for, physical protections for the lanes. And so, yeah, like option 2, both of the public speakers also advocated for it. So to me, this seems like the vastly superior option. I would also note that Menlo Park already has 2 lanes of traffic in the downtown area near Springline, and has higher average daily traffic than Atherton does. Average daily traffic on El Camino in Menlo Park, I believe, is 38,000. You cited 36,000. So, and there's no significant bottleneck there in my experience of walking, biking, driving that section. So I would not be terribly concerned about introducing a new bottleneck by reducing lanes when that's already been done in the adjacent part of Menlo Park and there's been no material effect. So that to me feels like a straightforward option. It's lower cost and it would be greatly beneficial. And I think it would induce a lot of fantastic cycling demand on El Camino, which is incredibly intimidating right now, even for confident cyclists.
A question, if I might, for Commissioner Reskoff. Obviously, concept number 2 is sort of a classic road diet option. In terms of the trade-offs that Carolyn was talking about before, if the 17 on-street parking spaces between Encinal and Glenwood need to be removed, is that the kind of trade-off that you think is worth considering?
Absolutely. I mean, 17 spaces for the benefit of, potentially thousands of users per day. There's plenty of parking in the adjacent areas of Atherton. I don't think those 17 spaces are critical to the needs. There's also, there's strip mall parking available. I'm thinking of like the Woodside Bike Shop, strip mall that's in this corridor. They have their own parking facilities. So, I don't see those spaces. I don't live in Atherton, obviously. I wouldn't be on this commission if I did. But the 17 is not a significant number. And if I compare that to the Middle Avenue project, for example, smaller stretch, we removed a lot more parking there. And there is definitely some trade-offs involved, but to me, it was absolutely worth it for a stretch that has much lower, traffic on it.
On that note, just a quick question. Have you looked at the occupancy of those parking spaces?
We have not. That's something we can do in the next phase of design work.
Okay, because as I drive past there, they're certainly not always full, so.
I have anyone else? No. I have a similar comment to Commissioner Eric Ramos. So I do drive that route frequently, El Camino, just as you leave Menlo Park going into Atherton. And I do look at the small businesses because this came up before. I actually don't see a lot of occupancy of those parking spaces, even during business hours. So one of the things I'm sure this is a common practice, but I know that the staff did with Middle Avenue was to look over time at Google Earth shots of Middle Avenue to see what the occupancy was at key times, and by doing that sort of calculate a rough occupancy rate. So that might be helpful. And the other thing is, again, I don't know this as well as you do, but I have thought when I've looked at the businesses, there seems to be other parking behind or around. So hopefully they could, those cars who need to drive there could be accommodated. But another way I look at the option 2 being the trade-off on option 2 being okay with losing the parking is that I think that the increased cost of saving in concept 3 of saving those 17 parking spots, but shifting the median over sounds like a huge increased cost.
Yes.
And a lot of traffic stoppage by doing that and having to do all that construction. And I don't think that that is worth it in terms, I would rather lose the parking spaces than shift the median. Also, my son just took his driver's test, and having been driving with a kid with a permit for weeks, the old idea of shifting medians is really maybe to be avoided. But generally, I agree. I think concept 2 is the smart one. And also, I just think it's really great to provide pedestrians and bicyclists with a consistent experience. I think that easy to navigate, simple to follow is a big preference. Do you want to say something else?
Yeah, sorry. I just want to emphasize that and also specifically de-emphasize option 1. I think that Commissioner Raskoff said that, but I think the speed on this stretch of El Camino makes an unprotected bike lane somewhat untenable. I think even if you were to draw a line on the pavement, you're not going to be welcoming to cyclists in that situation, and having a physically protected bike lane is, I think, very, very important here. So I support option 2. Option 3, with the caveats of expenses, would also meet that criteria, but I support option 2. But I also want to emphasize, as an aside to the commission, that all of our community feedback, and also my first instinct when I saw this proposal was the tie-in to Menlo Park, and that that's something that we really, as a city, need to be thinking about, especially as the town of Atherton and the city of Palo Alto move forward.
Any other feedback?
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention, I think that option 2 is the most obvious choice for a couple reasons. I would think that the community, in terms of the neighbors on that 1.5 mile stretch, are going to be very appreciative of reduced traffic and fewer lanes for more of a community feel. That's exactly what's happening with the San Mateo County project over by Sand Hill, over to the Alameda, is a reduction of lanes to create more of a community feel. And then the traffic flow is, it goes elsewhere. So, but in that, I know that we're going to also, besides the bike lanes being enhanced, the sidewalks are going to be enhanced. And I think that could possibly lead to crossings at the appropriate areas. Also, a movement of the bus stops to a intersection or a street corner would also enhance crossings at the appropriate areas. And I do get back to that refuge, because I know a lot of these fatalities have happened crossing El Camino by a vehicle hitting a pedestrian. And I am a little concerned about the fact that when there's a left turn coming out of a street, you lose part of the center refuge, even if there is a signal beacon. And I think for people with carriages or elderly people, you may still need that center refuge, even if there is a signal for crossing it, even with the allotted time. So I'd encourage you to consider, with that reduction in lanes, adding the refuge, even with this left turn, and enhancing the lighting.
I think it's a great idea. If anyone else wants to say anything. No.
I have.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Seaborn.
Yeah, I would also echo the general sentiment up here. Like, I think option 2 is by far and away the better choice. One of the things I've learned through my time on the commission is that enforcement is like a fleeting opportunity to reduce speeds, and that in fact, road design is the secret to speed reduction. And right now, we have road design that encourages speeding because it goes from congestion. It's like a 6-lane highway between congestion spots. And so I think taking away that extra lane reduces the driving need to pass whoever you were behind when you were stuck in Redwood City or Menlo Park. And I see that a lot when we reduced Middlefield to 1 lane. Like, I still see the jockeying in that quarter block they have, but it's cut way down on people wanting to speed around the other cars. So I think it's 100% the best choice. I will, because you asked us to discuss trade-offs, and I recognize that while I, as a cyclist, again, option 2, I think
in long-term plans is the better option. I do recognize that with the loss of that third lane, cars trying to get to Menlo are, drivers have often poor behavior and they're going to choose another way. And so I do think that it will result in some more traffic leaving El Camino before Valparaiso. And I'm sure that there can be things to mitigate it and, but I do recognize that that is a possible area of complaint that, but I've also driven through Atherton to get to Oak Knoll sometimes and got quite a lot of four-way stops that help to slow things down. So I'm all the way behind option 2. I think a design that makes bike lanes look more like the sidewalk, so the elevated bike lanes, I 100% support. I just want to compliment you on your presentation because normally we have a lot more backstory when things come to us because we've been involved since the start of it. And so you really filled in a lot of that for us since we weren't involved in all the parts of your study before you came here. And yeah, I think that was really, that's most of what I had. So like, I'm all the way behind option 2. I think it creates a nicer environment to be on the street. And frankly, for like the sort of town community feel in the long term, I think we're going to like it better, right? Like it just creates, and in the sort of storied history of El Camino, it'd be nice if it wasn't just a 6-lane highway, but like a road with some history that people could enjoy.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Also in favor of design option number 2. My fellow commissioners have really hit every note that I've written down. I do have 2 comments, questions. One, I as a driver actually find the Hawk beacons deeply confusing. You're smart, right? I think other drivers too, just based on fellow driver behavior that I see.
Yeah, me too.
It's the solid red, it's the blinking red. People aren't quite sure what to do. I have seen some that actually like have instructional
Santa Clara
signs.
does.
So I would just say, please consider that just as a way to make sure that drivers know what they're doing. And I appreciated that Andrew brought up what our cities north and south are doing. To the best of my knowledge, there's not a firm commitment. Is that correct at this point? Or do we have firm commitments as far as El Camino from cities in the north or south?
For the segment in Redwood City, that project is a little further along than we are. It's actually in project initiation phase with Caltrans. So a little more concrete than Atherton, which is the planning phase, and of course Menlo Park.
Palo Alto, how firm is that?
They voted on, the council voted on it last year, 24, yeah.
There's a
Brian, you
really
know.
great, Palo Alto has a really great website summarizing everything that's going on because it's a lot to describe.
Okay. I just wanted to add something to what Commissioner King said. So earlier on, I was really pleased to hear that you were planning to enhance the intersections and the crossings where if you were increasing bike and ped traffic in your section of El Camino. But I'm just not sure if I misheard this. Are you going to increase the number of crossings?
Yeah, we are considering at least one possible signalized intersection, potentially at Watkins. And we did take a look at where the collisions have been. And so I just want to clarify that some of the mid-block
Sure.
collisions we're talking about are in the Watkins sort of area.
Okay.
But yes, we're considering at least one possible signalized intersection along with enhancements to our existing Hawk crossings with refuges and possible improved hawking, flashing.
Thank you. I think you could hear from a lot of the commissioners tonight that that was really an area of interest. So appreciate your commitment to that. I think the only thing, what else do I have here? Hold on a second. Retains. Oh, it's out. So you're obviously working in an extremely holistic way, and that you're thinking about the way what you're doing connects with the cities north and south, et cetera. And I appreciate that very much. And we will, as a commission, obviously we value the pedestrian and bike ability of El Camino. So we will really be working with the city on that and encouraging them to work, obviously, with you in the way that they are, because I do think those connections are really important for bikes and peds as well. So we'll commit to that. I guess the last thing I had written when I was looking at 2 verse 3 and then eventually favoring 2 was, are you anticipating any reaction from the public about traffic impacts to losing a vehicle lane on each side? And what is obviously one of the responses is this is a safer, or we believe the solution is better and that the parking spots are a trade-off we would be willing to take for the design of concept 2. But do you anticipate that being a big pushback?
In short, yes.
Okay.
We're very focused on neighborhood impacts. So someone mentioned earlier the
Right.
potential for diversion. We don't want to push traffic off the main line. And I think, at least in Atherton, I think also in Menlo Park north of Glenwood, there aren't a lot of great parallel streets
No.
for diverting traffic. So we have that in our favor, but we're very attuned to that, especially around the Menlo College area.
Like Alejandra to Emily and getting to Valpo, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So traffic diversion is something we've heard a lot from our residents. The majority of Atherton residents drive on El Camino. And so when they hear about a lane taking, a road diet, if you will, the concern is this going to create more bottlenecks? To which many of us say that on the open stretches of El Camino, there are no bottlenecks.
Right.
It's a freeway, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't change the perception that a road diet, they're rare. And so there's a certain amount of concern and
Yeah.
fear about that.
Do you think one of the things you have going in your favor, an argument in your favor, is that you don't have a lot of businesses along that stretch? So people aren't stopping as much. There's not as much congestion there. You do have some, obviously, of the 17 parking spots, and those reflect those businesses facing El Camino. But a lot of that stretch isn't zoned for business, right? After you get beyond Menlo College.
Yeah. Certainly Atherton residents are aware that businesses aren't going to be affected in Atherton because there aren't any.
Well, meaning that there's less traffic congestion. People are passing through more, right, in there than stopping.
The bigger concern we've heard has been, don't make the backups on side streets like Fair Oaks, which is our connection to the freeway, worse. And so we're very sensitive to trying to limit that kind of side street impact.
Understood.
I'll just add that beyond this planning study, we do still need to coordinate with Caltrans.
Yeah.
Who very much so will be concerned about the change in traffic operations. So just doing our due diligence now will sort of set us up for more smooth coordination with Caltrans later.
Yeah. Well, I've appreciated from the beginning the focus that you've taken on community involvement and getting feedback from the community at every stage, because it seems that that's more and more important with big infrastructural changes, both in Menlo Park and Atherton, right? So I think I commend that. I think that will serve you well. All right. Well, does anyone have any other feedback? I think we were just providing feedback today, or we weren't giving a motion, were we? Of any kind? Right. Okay. All right. Not in our jurisdiction. All right. We hope that was helpful. Anything else that okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and the excellent report and your work. Okay, well, we will move on to informational items where the city staff provides an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The first informational item tonight is F1, update on major project status. Katrine, do you have any updates?
I do. The 2025 street resurfacing project for all of Menlo Park.
Yes.
It is part of the 5-year street maintenance program. It's been published on the city website.
Great.
So that includes a map of the proposed street resurfacing locations. The construction is tentatively set for May.
Fantastic.
And you can view the map online for exact locations and extents, but I can quickly list the streets just to stir interest.
Thank you.
They are Deanna Drive, Monte Rosa Drive, Stanford Avenue, and I've only been here a year and a half, so forgive me
Yes.
if I pronounce them wrong. Is it Millie? Mille? Millie? Millie Avenue.
I don't know where that is. Huh.
Roble Avenue?
Roble, yeah.
Roble, okay. Waverly Street, East Creek Road, Middlefield Road, Woodland Avenue, Grayson Court, Sevier Avenue, Iris Lane, and Chrysler Drive.
Okay. So this might be unrelated, but I know that part of the the installation of traffic calming measures in Middle Avenue includes resurfacing. They wanted to combine and do the same time in the summer of 2025. So whenever you have an update on timing of that, we would love to hear that one as well.
Yes, and that is a separate resurfacing.
It might be separate because it's bundled with another project, but
Exactly,
maybe
yeah.
look into that. Let us know. if you
Yeah,
would
it
appreciate
it should be happening. I know right now the goal is to have it happen before school begins. That's
Oh,
the
super.
target right now because
Great.
we don't want construction going on when
Yeah.
school starts.
Thank you, Katrina. All right, then, moving on to the tentative Complete Streets Commission agenda. Katrina, would you like to review that as well?
Yes. I'm gonna quick just pull it up just for ease of sharing. You should see it interesting here. So upcoming agenda topics that I can't wait to talk to you about will be the action plan and strategies for program implementation for the Vision Zero action plan, the daylighting implementation plan for AB 413, an update on Middlefield Road and the Safe Streets project going on in Middlefield, implementation plan for the Vision Zero plan, which is we'll see which one I come to you first with, whether we just talk about slow streets or we talk about kind of the whole Vision Zero
Yeah.
plan, because they're kind of listed there twice. And then this last one, the Grand Boulevard Initiative, is similar to what we talked to tonight, but it's just more of a regional approach to looking at what's going on in El Camino Real. And so Sam Trans wants to come and give a presentation to give you an overview of what that project will be. So that will give you a perspective on what was kind of referenced and talked about tonight about.
I'm glad that we'll get to know more about that. Thank
Hopefully
you.
that should be coming soon. They've asked me like, when can we get on the calendar? So we're coordinating that date right now.
Thank you, Katrine.
Mhm.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry about this. I skipped this. For both the update, let's start with update on major project status, which was the conversation about the resurfacing projects, et cetera. I meant to ask Katrine to call for public comments.
We both got so excited. For virtual attendees
skip
who
it
wish to
along.
provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I do. I have a raised hand.
Oh, good.
Kevin, you may speak.
Hi, hi again, committee members, staff. The resurfacing part, I noticed Woodland was on this and I live off of Woodland. Woodland is one of the parts that this is an addendum to the resurfacing. If it has a sidewalk on one side because the creek's on the other, and the rest of Woodland, for the most part, does not have a sidewalk, even though there's been new houses built and remodels. And I've talked to I'm forgetting the director of planning, and they said, yes, you're supposed to put sidewalks in when you do X number of building. And they said they just weren't following the code on that one, just as an aside, if anybody can talk to them on that. But for the resurfacing, if more can be done, because that Woodland is right close to a blind corner, if more could be done in those areas for Vision Zero, people cross the street because it's really close to Middlefield. If more attention could be done with that, and in addition, I know with resurfacing, more Vision Zero type of plans are supposed to be implemented with that.
Yep.
Thank you. Yield back. Yep.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. Similarly, maybe we could throw that slide up again. Thank you, Katrine, on the tentative Complete Streets Commission agenda. Katrine will call for public comments on that item.
For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I do not see a raised hand.
All right, thank you, Katrine. Committee, subcommittee reports. I think Commissioner Bailey, you are going to follow up. Thank you.
Yeah, just a thank you to the commissioners who have had a chance to review our bike inventory survey that myself and Commissioner Eric Holmes have been working on. Commissioner Eric Holmes and I would love to take all the comments and kind of start working through them within about a week. So if you have not yet had a chance to put in comments, like maybe in like the next week or so, if you need a little bit more time, that's fine. Just let us know. But we would love to kind of start drilling down on that and coming up with a final version. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else from anyone else? All right, then. Well, Katrine, congratulations on your first meeting. And we will adjourn this meeting at 8:25 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.